College of Pharmacy. The dean of the College of Pharmacy is a professor and a scientific research. He has gone through this cycle. Because remember, he had to educate himself because he's doing something new, and so he can't pick up a textbook, so he has to keep educating himself as he goes through the cycle. He's created probably about 40 different startup companies, and he sold them to Novartis and other huge pharmaceutical companies. And now, he's the dean of the College of Pharmacy, so he's teaching, and he's doing administration, which I'm sure he hates, and he's also busy, you know, with new research, new innovations, new business. This is the modern world. Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. To understand where we are today, we got to take a quick peek at where we came from, so you really understand how radically the world's changed in my lifetime, in your lifetime. Even as recently as 20, 30 years ago. As recently as 20, 30 years ago. Labor economists would divide up labor, categorize labor in a very simple way. You had agricultural labor, you had manufacturing labor, right? Think of Ukraine in the 1980s. You had agriculture, you had manufacturing. That's pretty much it. And they would also classify labor as, well, skilled, unskilled, okay? Simple classifications for a more simple time, a more simple economic structure. Today, pay attention to this one. This is now how, during about the last 20 years, by the way, this classification scheme was developed by a professor named Robert Reich, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Labor. Brilliant, brilliant man. This is how we classify labor now. Notice it's not industry specific. It's not even skill specific. It's based on what you do. So, routine production, in-person services, symbolic analysts. To anticipate where I'm going, we're all symbolic analysts, okay? So, think of these three categories. Here's quickly what they are. Routine production. Think of people, women, men, working in manufacturing, working in construction, working in transportation, driving the bus, driving the train, working in an assembly line, going out building a building. The key to this is that these jobs can be both skilled and unskilled. If you're an airline pilot flying a 787, you're a really highly skilled man or woman, but you're still doing routine production. You're flying the plane. Every day, you're just flying the plane, and you're flying the plane, and that's all you do. You fly the plane. This is routine production, okay? In-person services are these kinds of people. Again, skilled and unskilled, right? Doctors and teachers. Doctors and teachers are very highly skilled. They cannot do their work unless they are literally in person, right? I can't, if I'm a doctor, I can't take out your appendix unless I can literally put my hands on your body, okay? And it's not routine because every human body has different, types of problems with their health. So there's nothing routine about being a doctor. Even a dentist, there's nothing routine about being a doctor. You gotta be skilled and you gotta be person to person. If I want you to fix the plumbing in my house, if I want you to repair my car, you and my car, you and my house have to physically get together. You have to do your service, skilled or unskilled, in person. Maids, barbers, taxi drivers, okay? Has to be done in person, okay? This is all of us. And I could have put 100 more categories, but I chose these. Symbolic analysts are people who work with, whose services are intangible. A carpenter builds a house. An accountant sits at an Excel spreadsheet and generates numbers. Shows it to his boss on a computer screen and the boss cries. because again, they're losing money. Symbolic analysts, we are manipulating words, numbers, lots of symbols, okay? Right? Think of differential calculus, okay? Those aren't numbers, those are symbols. And we're providing a service that may become a product. A person designing, a person working for Elon Musk, SpaceX, designing a rocket that's reusable, goes into space, comes back and lands. Those guys, those women, are symbolic analysts. But their symbolic analytical work eventually produces a physical product, the rocket that goes up and down. So all of these people, architects, they're working with CAD-CAM, CAD-CAM programs that draw buildings three-dimensional, so you can look 1,000 different ways at 1,000 different buildings for a piece of land. All these engineers, scientists, everything starts with their brain manipulating symbols. Even just sitting down and dreaming up crazy ideas like Apple computers. What a crazy idea to have in like 1983, right? Okay, this is where you guys are. This is where more and more and more of the modern workforce is. All right, we don't have, when my grandfather was a young man in America, you probably had, I'm going to guess, wild guess, 80%, 90% of all the jobs in America were farmers. Now we have 3%. 3% of all the employment in America is in farming. We have the world's largest agricultural industry. Why can we do it with only 3%? Well, because more and more and more people are becoming symbolic analysts, and they're figuring out how to have the world's largest agricultural industry with only 3% of the workforce. All right. Now, pay attention to this if you're planning to have a job for the next 50 years. Well, that sounds, sorry, that's like a negative thing to say on a Monday morning. Look forward to working for 50 more years. All right, look, risk of job loss, right? All right. Routine production jobs, remember those guys? The highly skilled airline pilot, the very low skilled person in China assembling an Apple phone for Foxconn. I'm going to come back to her in a minute. That's high risk. Very high risk of losing your job if you're in one of these kinds of routine production. You're going to lose it to automation, to advanced algorithms, what some people call AI, artificial intelligence. I don't like that term. I love science fiction, but I prefer advanced algorithms because that's what artificial intelligence is. It's advanced algorithms. And that kind of change is putting those jobs at very high risk. In-person services, there's some moderate risk. We're going to get to this in a minute. Sadly, for people like us, we're in moderate to high risk. It all depends on what we do and where we do it, and in what industry and under what conditions. We might be moderate risk. We're not going to be low risk. No such thing as low risk. Low risk doesn't exist. It's going to be moderate risk, or it's going to be high risk. I'll give you a little hint. If you're an appraiser, you guys know what appraisers are, yeah? An appraiser is a guy or a woman. They come to your apartment and they say, $50,000. That's the market value of your apartment. We have, I don't know, 30, 40,000 appraisers in America. Now, they appraise commercial real estate. They appraise residential. They appraise machineries and companies and antique cars and jewelry. Most probably, I'm going to guess over the next 20 years, maybe 10, 90% of all the appraisers are going to lose their jobs. They're very highly skilled. One of my companies in Ukraine happens to be an appraisal firm, right? And we've had to survive by educating ourselves seriously, and getting into more complex, more highly specialized, with more money, little niches. Okay, so we're the guys that if somebody has a really difficult type of valuation they need, they come to us. If we were trying to survive in Ukraine, valuing apartments for sale, we'd starve to death. And because what's happening is advanced algorithms, plus big data, are going to eliminate these appraisal jobs. Even though they're highly skilled and people make good money today, that you can just see it. The profession in America is aging, the average age is going up, and the number of people is coming down because it's getting replaced by big data plus algorithms. So don't become an appraiser. Okay, look at the title. Job killers and job creators. Two sides to the same coin, right? Life is not a zero-sum game, all right? The same forces that can kill jobs also creates jobs. For example, the fastest growing job in America during the last year or two. You know what it is? Fastest growing job. It's a skilled job, pays a lot of money. It's a wind turbine engineer. Wind turbine engineers. Because we're building all kinds of wind turbines, but somebody has to go out there and monitor them and repair them and renovate them, right? Somebody has to literally go out there and repair these, did I say windmills, or should I say wind turbines? I hope I didn't say windmill, like 17th century Dutch guy. Wind turbines, fastest growing. They get paid about $80,000 a year. Where did they come from? A lot of those guys lost their jobs in the metallurgical industry. They lost their jobs in coal mining industry. Okay? They weren't digging the coal, but they were engineers. And they were in coal, which is dying, thankfully. And they were at steel mills and other kinds of electronics plants that aren't competitive in America anymore. And so they moved over into alternative energy. And coming close behind them are people, engineers in solar. Because yeah, somebody has to design it. That's a symbolic analyst. Somebody has to build it. And that's still routine production, which is mostly automated now with robots. But somebody has to write the code for the robot. And eventually it gets installed, solar panels and wind. Somebody, in-person services. In-person services. Somebody has to go there and, sorry about that. Somebody has to go there and repair the solar arrays and the wind turbines. They're highly skilled, it's in person. The guys writing the code to control the robots to build solar panels, wind turbines, they're symbolic analysts, okay? People doing the physical assembly, well, they're routine production. So you've got all these different types of new labor involved in a super high-tech industry. Some are at more risk than others. So, look at this. This is pretty obvious, outsourcing and imports, okay? There's a reason why Ukraine imports 99% of its automobiles, not because you can't build them, but because it's better to buy automobiles from Japan or Germany. It's called competitive advantage, okay? But an outsourcing, okay? If a company is doing something less efficiently and more expensive than they can give a contract to a private company, whether that private company is across the street or in Kiev or Bangalore, they're going to outsource, okay? But if they outsource and they become more profitable, they might increase their investment in an industry where, in some application, some innovation where they're competitive, that might then increase their employment. So nothing's a zero-sum game. You can have IT jobs getting outsourced, and then you can still end up creating more jobs in the country that outsourced that work. And if you outsource IT jobs to Kiev, that's great for Ukraine. We all live on the same planet now, so we want Kiev to be as prosperous as, you know, New York. Maybe Shanghai would be a better example. Okay. Services at a distance. We've talked a lot about this. There's going to be less doctors in the future. Now, not a whole lot less doctors. There's going to be less doctors. Because if I'm a doctor, and I can see, I'm just going to make up numbers, round numbers. If I can see 10 patients in a day, well, because of advanced algorithms and big data, do you know, get a load of this number, I love this number, there are currently more than 250,000 cell phone apps that deal with medical issues. 250,000 cell phone. Look, every cell phone, you guys have a cell phone, you can check your heart rate, you can check your pulse, you can check your stress. There's cell phone apps that let diabetics sitting at home check their insulin levels. Just came out on the market within the last week, this tiny, tiny, tiny little chip. I'm not making this up. It's nanotechnology. Little nano chip. You put it in a pill, you swallow it, and it goes and it attaches itself harmlessly on the lining of your stomach. And 24/7, real time, as long as you're online, 24/7, real time, it is monitoring your entire metabolism and reporting it to your cell phone, which is then sending it to whatever doctor you authorize the data to go to. So, doctors, there might be less doctors, but certainly there's going to be a huge, already has been, increase in the efficiency with which doctors provide medical services. Now, what's the problem? There's always a weak link in the chain. There's only so many hours in the day that a doctor can do this. So all of this apps, 250,000 medical apps, that's allowing patients, they don't have to go in person to the doctor's office for blood testing, do it at home, transmit the data. They can have a little chip, and it's monitoring their diabetes or their liver disease or whatever they have. There's been a huge increase in the demand for what's called physician's assistants. Not the same thing as a nurse. Nurse comes, give you a shot, and okay, makes you feel good. The physician's assistant are a lot of IT people with very highly advanced skills in statistics and data management and medicine. Notice the multitask knowledge they've had to do. They have to learn IT, they got to learn statistics, they have to learn some, biology, physiology. They have to learn all these multidisciplinary skills. They're paid a lot of money. They're paid like $100,000 a year. And it's booming, 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 because the physician's assistant, I have a doctor friend, he's now employed 2 of them just in the last few years. The physician's assistant takes all of this data from all the patients, compiles it, organizes it, analyzes it, prioritizes it, summarizes it, gives it to the doctor. So now this doctor, who maybe he saw 10 patients in person, well, he might still see 10 in person, but he's going to see 100 sitting at his desk, drinking his coffee. He's going to see 100 patients. And so somebody has to write these algorithms. But notice, this job, physician's assistant, didn't exist 10 years ago. Here's another statistic to remember. I love statistics. 1/3 of all the jobs in America, job titles, like physician's assistant, like game developer, right? Write the code for some game. But about 1/3, at least, of all the job titles in America didn't exist 20 years ago. 20 years. 20 years, 20, 25 years. 1/3 of the job titles today didn't even exist 20, 25 years ago. Okay? So if you look out over the next, say, 25 years, next generation, at least half of all the job titles that exist today won't exist 25 years from now. The jobs will change or they'll go extinct. There'll be completely new industries, new innovations, new applications, new industries, new jobs. This is why you have to be living and thinking dynamically. Okay, future of work. That's the future of work. Memorize it, believe in it, do it. Do it. Future of work. We're not talking the 1950s here, where you get a job at the automobile plant, you assemble cars for 40 years, you retire and die. That's just never, ever going to happen. It's finished. It's gone. You have to be continually upskilled, and you have to be continually multi-skilled. Multi-skilled means like the physician's assistant. That person has to know enough medicine to understand what the heck the data is and what a data says, but they also have to have IT, so they have to have statistical analytic skills. Okay? So you've got to be continuously multi-skilled, continuously upskilled. Everything is multidisciplinary. Again, think of the physician's assistant. Everything's interconnected. Remember my beloved cycle of progress, right? See all those lines? Everything's interconnected. Nothing sits in a separate box anymore. And this is the most important one. You've got to be versatile and adaptable. I've had, depending on how you define a career, I've had at least 4 or 5 careers in my life. All right? I mean, literally, at least 4 or 5 careers. I mean, I've lived and worked in at least 40 countries. But so I've had to be, I've woken up in Mongolia, where I spent 2 years reorganizing Asia's largest copper mine and separating the ownership from some really unfriendly Russians who didn't like me. Okay, but and I've woken up in Boulder, Colorado, where I've been a professor. I mean, I've done research with the government. I've had my own business. I've had different kinds of business. And I just told you, now, suddenly I'm involved in biotech startups. How does an economist end up in biotech startup? Well, I'm versatile, I'm adaptable, and you are too. And I'm continually upskilling and multi-skilling myself. Before I could get involved in nanobiotechnology startups, guess what? I had to educate myself on nanotechnology, on biotechnology, on nanobiotechnology. Now, I'm not saying to educate myself to the point where I get a PhD in biotech. No, no, no. The phrase is called working knowledge. All right? One point in my life, I was put in charge of 50 geologists, chemists, minerals economists, mining engineers, because I was supposed to be doing for the security services and Pentagon in America all this international strategic mineral research. Okay, right, cool. But I didn't know anything about mineral economics. I know about economics, so I had to really quickly upskill myself and multi-skill myself, because how can I manage people who are geologists, chemists, if I don't know anything about chemistry, I don't know anything about geology or mining engineering? So like it or not, I had to multi-skill myself, and I had to keep upskilling myself. This is probably the newest thing going on right now, the gig economy. Nice millennial phrase there, love it, gig economy. This is I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, because I see a lot of gains in economic efficiency, but I also see a lot of social problems. In the United States, during the last 10 years, by the way, the only reason we know this stuff is because of big data and because of enormous advances in IT and computing power that allows us to actually get this kind of data. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had this kind of data. Or by the time we got it, it'd be 20 years old by the time some guy sat there with an adding machine. Okay. Over that 10-year period, somewhere between 11, it rose from 11 to 16% of all the jobs in America. I mean, I mean, we have 320 million people in America. We have to have at least 200 million people in the workforce. So, 11 to 16% of it, at least 200 million, that's a lot of people. And what's really shocking is 60% of net job growth has been in this so-called gig economy, right? On call. Uber, you're on call. It's temporary, right? And this is where a lot of the corporate abuse comes from, okay? A lot of corporate abuse and temporary. They hire you temporary because then they don't have to give you medical insurance, and they don't have to give you a raise, and they don't have to give you a pension. So, we only have these kinds of workers because of all these advances in the economy, especially IT and things. But, we're all one big global family, whether we like it or not. And so we have to come back and solve some of the social problems. And there's social problems. And again, contract labor. I mean, a lot of the work I do, is just contract labor. I mean, a company will hire me to do a contract. I might work on that contract for a year, but I'm never going to be a full-time employee. It's just a contract. Here's your money. Now you provide all your own medical and retirement. And okay, so this is something to keep an eye on. Okay, industries of the future. I could have put others up here, but I grabbed these because I like even numbers. The key is that they're all science-based. This is it, man. I mean, forget about, 18th century subsistence farming. Forget about mid-20th century manufacturing, working at a steel mill, working at a textile mill, working at an electronic. Forget about that. Even if you're the smartest person in the company, it doesn't matter. The industries of the future are all science-based. All right. I mean, the industries that I would hope you would want to work in are all science-based. We talked about renewable energy, right? Wind and solar. Now, again, there's no zero sum. A lot of coal miners in America are losing their jobs, but a lot of them are going to work in other sectors, including this one. Okay, a lot of. I'm going to concentrate now on the skilled, symbolic analyst kind of people, because that's who you are. A lot of engineers that were in metallurgical, some basic manufacturing before it left the U.S. to go to China and other places. They're now working in advanced materials. Advanced materials, think 3D printing, right? That's advanced materials. The materials themselves, the ability to 3D print. They're 3D printing entire houses now. They're 3D printing kidneys. This just blows my mind, I mean, I don't know. I'm having a hard time thinking about going over to the copy machine and you pull out a kidney, I'm not, I don't know. Maybe not on a Monday morning, no, right? Yeah. Okay, I put this up here because everybody likes this. I like advanced algorithms. All right, that's what artificial intelligence is. It's advanced algorithms. And of course IT, and of course biotech, nanotech, aerospace, robotics. For all the Ukrainians here, Ukraine has a proven scientific capability as one of the top maybe 10 countries in the whole world on the science side, and some on the business side when it comes to biotechnology, nanotechnology. This is mostly still on the science. Ukraine is very famous, deservedly, for what it does with aerospace. So biotech, aerospace, those are two big industries of the future in Ukraine. Every time I look at artificial intelligence, I think of Donald Trump. This is something artificial about the intelligence. All right, let's move on. No political comments. All right. Innovations. Now remember, you got the remember the cycle of progress, right? So you got the science, But then you've got innovations, and out of the innovations comes applications. Eventually, through time, and not very much time, it wasn't just Apple Computer, but it was the iPhone and the iPad and so on and so forth. Those are applications coming off of innovations, which is, sort of computer circuitry, if you will, and coming off of the basic science, okay? Can't have innovation without science, can't have applications without science. Those 250,000 cell phone apps, just for health, well, they wouldn't exist if you didn't have a cell phone. And you couldn't have a cell phone unless you had innovations in technology that would support the cell phone. But the innovations started with basic scientific research in microchips. Actually, the chip was the innovation, but the microchip thinking part was the science. Okay, so these are where you're going to see innovations and applications, big time. Synthetic bio, and before I mention some of them, they're all interrelated. They're all interrelated. Remember I told you about the startup I'm involved with now? Well, it's a small business, been around 4 or 5 years. It's nano-biotechnology, right? So, there's always this interconnectedness, okay? That's the future of work. Everything's interconnected. So you're going to see a lot of growth and development in these areas. Pharmaceuticals, for sure. Healthcare, pharmaceuticals, food. You're going to see big changes in food. We're going to see probably algae. My science friends keep telling me it's pronounced algae, but I think algae just sounds better. So algae to replace beef, all right? We already have the science, they've already innovated, but now it's in the realm more of, in the mass production of beef substitutes to save the planet, using algae to literally grow the beef, using not algae is for replacing biofuels based on corn and things like that. They're using proteins. They're literally taking proteins, the proteins that are in a cow's body that grow the cow and make beef, and they're taking that and they're literally growing a beef substitute in the laboratory. Well, the problem we're going to have is marketing, right? You gotta change those consumer preferences. If you say to somebody who likes to eat a steak, well, there's a steak from a cow and there's a steak that was grown in a laboratory. Okay, he's going to gross out. Okay, well, that's going to change. Okay, so that's going to change. But that's marketing, advertising. So, big time environmental. A lot of science, a lot of innovation, environmental. Bacteria that can clean up nuclear waste, like at Fukushima or Chernobyl. So you build some stupid sarcophagus, how primitive. You have these algae that literally eat radioactive substances. Lots of different, lots of different bacterias that will clean up polluted areas, whether it's radioactive or just, more normal kinds of pollution. This will help, for example, in Africa, Asia, South America, where the southern United States, where we still have a lot of diseases that are kind of waterborne and they're based on pollution because there's not proper environmental. You want to see pollution, go to Louisiana. But these bacteria come along and they can clean up a lot of this pollution. Bacteria, algae can be used for applications in food storage, food safety, food enhancement. There's a lot of synthetic biology. Think of 3D printing a kidney, or 3D printing, instead of taking a pig's artery like we unfortunately did to save the life of Dick Cheney. Instead of taking a pig's artery for your heart, you just 3D print it. And it'll last forever, it'll be easier. You don't have to worry about your body rejecting this foreign body part because it's, okay? First of all, they can 3D print it using your stem cells. So your body just said, oh, cool, I grew a new artery, I grew a new heart. Wow. Okay, so all of this is going to happen, but it's all science-based. Some people don't have a heart to begin with, can't grow one, but it's all science-based, and it's all science, innovations, applications, business, education. Again, my favorite example, transportation, whoa, man. Think autonomous vehicles, think driverless cars, think reusable rockets, think space tourism, think, in case you were not aware, Elon Musk is one of my heroes. Okay, I think he's like lots of people's hero. Think colonies on the moon, colonies on Mars. So there's going to be big, big changes in all of these areas. So we're right back to here. And I've got to emphasize, this is amazing. Finish early. That'll make me popular, yeah? Do you have a little form to fill out that says how much we loved the seminar? Okay, remember, I'm the guy who finished early. I'm not the guy that, oh, wait, just one more slide, and you're thinking, I want to eat lunch. Yeah. But seriously, we have to spend just a couple minutes focusing on this again. I'm going to work 20 more years, so I've got to deal with this too. By the way, there's no such thing as retirement anymore. Remember, all of these categories of people, agricultural, manufacturing, even the invention of something stupid like daylight savings time, or the concept of a person who's retired. This all harkens back to an old industrial agricultural age. And that's not where we're going in the future. Now, we're going to be carrying, old thinking people and old industries. We're going to be carrying them with us like some dead weight, But the future is not about the past. And this idea of a retiree really doesn't exist anymore. My mother and brother run two businesses, an accounting business and a financial planning business. And they both work full time. And my mother's 93 years old. Now, how about that? Hope I didn't give my age away having 93. How can she do this? First of all, she's an innovator. She bought a big old house, and she lives in this part of this huge house, and she puts her businesses in this part of the huge house. So her commute to the office, it's about 10 steps. Okay, well maybe it's 20 steps now, because she's kind of walking like that. So it's about 10 steps to the office. And she's a symbolic analyst. And they see the changes coming. And they understand that a lot of accountants are going to lose their jobs to advanced algorithms. You can go online right now, download all these accounting forms, do your own accounting online. Now in America, fortunately for my mother and brother, the tax code is so complicated, that it's hard to do that. But accountants, lawyers, I can go online right now, pull down a will, pull down a living will, pull down contracts, all kinds of different types of contracts. Just pull them down. Maybe I might have to pay $20. Pull them down, do it myself. All I gotta do is have a notary. I don't have to pay some guy $250 an hour to write a contract. Download the contract. Download it, fill it all out, get it done. Then I might hire the guy instead of for 10 hours, the lawyer, I might hire him for 1, because lawyers read fast, and say, read it, and tell me if there's anything particularly wrong or stupid in there. But what they've done, just like me, is they've gone into these little niches. So they set their businesses up in a community where you still have a lot of so-called retirees. Because these are people who were working in factories and, the old system, and they became 65 and they got kicked out the door, even though they were smart and healthy, but you get kicked out the door. And so now they got to retire. So they go to a nice beach place in South Carolina. And then my brother jumps up and says, "Hi, I'm a specialist in financial planning. But I don't do financial planning for you. You're too young. I do financial planning for people over 65. And so now his business is booming because he got in a little niche. He got in a little niche there. And remember, his financial planning is also an in-person service. Nobody says, "Okay, take my life savings and invest it and manage it for me, but I've never met you. I've never shook your hand and looked at you and chit-chatted." You know? No. That's, you know, we're a psychological species. And there's always going to be a need for in-person contact. Something like financial planning, it's already all IT-based, big database. Why are financial planners doing so well? Because nobody wants to trust their money and their investments and the security of themselves to somebody they don't know. So they come and they sit down in the office and they get to know you, and then you start working with them. Okay? All right. So that's the last slide. But again, just remember, all of this is here. I'm educating myself now on nanotechnology and biotechnology to get a working knowledge, not because I'm going to be the guy producing the product, but I'm the guy involved over here with the business. You cannot participate in a business, especially if you're going to be an executive. I mean, that's what all you guys want to be, it's executives, right? Can't be an executive in a business if you don't know the business. You just can't be, they say, well, I got an MBA, so I'm going to go be the CFO for a biotech company. Oh God, you know just enough to be dangerous. You have to know the biotech industry. You got to have a working knowledge of the science. You got to know who's doing what innovation, what new applications, where's the markets going, right? And to do all, and then you'll say, just like I've had to say 4 or 5 times in my life, honestly, you'll have to say, you know what? I don't know anything about that. I mean, I had to admit, you know, that, gee, I don't know anything about mining engineering and geology, but, you know, give me a couple of months and I'll develop a working knowledge. Well, I don't know anything about biotech and nanotech. Just give me some time, I'll develop a working knowledge. Because, you know, that's the main reason that you go to school. I would hope that every institution of higher education, everywhere in the world, would understand they teach one and only one thing. They don't teach accounting, they don't teach finance, they don't teach marketing. I mean, they do, but they don't. They teach critical thinking. You know, but the best way to learn critical thinking is to teach yourself critical thinking. Man, I'm really serious. You know, look at something, see the strength, see the weakness, see the opportunity. Step back and say, is that innovation coming up or down? Is this industry growing or dying? You know, what the hell am I doing, you know, working in a factory? I mean, the factory's going to go away. How about if I go work over here? I'm an engineer, I'm a smart guy, but why should I stay in the metallurgical industry, which is dying? Why don't I go work in the renewable energy industry? Because I'm a smart guy and I got all these degrees in engineering, you know, and if I can learn metallurgical engineering, I can learn solar engineering. I just have to turn on my brain and develop it, okay? So that's the key. These things all the time, keep them in your brain all the time. And don't be afraid to sit down with a book on genetics. If you have to, read books on biology or genetics if you think biotech's a good place for me to take my business knowledge. Because remember, you know, scientists need business people, okay? Do you know why Apple, I promised to quit, do you know why Apple went essentially bankrupt? It took off like a rocket because it was on the front of the wave, it was the leading edge. Jobs was a genius. And then it died. Oh, it came so close to dying because Steve Jobs himself was actually a terrible businessman. He was a genius at mainly applications, innovation and application. This was his genius. By the way, but before you think all scientists, the reason Thomas Edison, you know, the guy with the light bulb, direct current, or Tesla, alternating current, Westinghouse, the reason those guys were so successful, especially Edison and Westinghouse, is they were not just smart scientifically. They were not just geniuses at innovation and application. I'm sorry, if you invent the light bulb, if you're Sikorsky and you invent the helicopter, you're a genius. Okay? And so they were geniuses here, but they also had a knack for business. Steve Jobs didn't have a knack for business, almost killed the company, and then the company brought him back. And then they went to their second phase of growth. Why did they bring him back? Because the business people were much better at business than Steve Jobs, but they were losing the market because they couldn't keep up with the innovation and the applications. And one day the new CEO woke up and said, I know a guy who's really good at innovations and applications. His name's Steve Jobs. They brought him back, and then what did he do? iPhone, iPad, okay? But they kept him away from running the business. You know, the closest he came was to go on a stage and, you know, make a presentation. So everybody has their strengths. So, all right, we're going to finish